Do you ever have times where you feel really invisible? Invisible to yourself, invisible to the people around you, or just invisible to the world? I know for myself, I've had moments where I felt invisible. And it took me time to realize that the feeling that I was feeling, that discomfort in my body, the feeling of like just not wanting to be in my skin or kind of feeling like out of touch, or agitated, was a feeling of invisibility. My name is Esther Goldstein, and I'm an anxiety and trauma therapist. And one of my lifelong passions have been about helping people find joy and meaning in being in their own lives and in being in their own skin. When it comes to the concept of living, I think one of the big pieces that people look at is, how can I be happy? How can I feel whole? How can I reach my visions? How can I reach my dreams? But one of the things that we often skip over is, how can I simply learn to be? How can I learn to be in my skin? How can I actually get to know myself and really be comfortable being in myself? So I invite you for just right here, right now, or the next few moments you have, to really get curious, maybe take a pen and paper and jot down the people, the places, the spaces, the times where you feel seen, where you feel like you have a space, or where you feel like you're in touch with yourself. It might be a friend who, when you connect, you feel like that person really listens to you. It might be a time in the morning when you pray. It might be when you're actually busy cooking in the kitchen, or it may even be at work where you're actually acknowledged and noticed for what you're doing. Okay? And it might be something totally else. And now I want you to get curious about when you don't feel seen, when you feel kind of invisible. Is it when you're out of touch with yourself and you're stuck in this like whirlwind or this insecurity loop of just like being down on yourself, being stuck with this voice of the inner critic? Is it maybe when you're in environments or in a relationship with someone who is not good for you, and where you're constantly, maybe stuck in conflict, feeling invisible? Or maybe is it something else? Is it a time of year? Are there certain emotional triggers or flashbacks where maybe once a year when you go to a certain vacation home, or maybe when you're surrounded by a certain social group, or maybe when you are physically alone, or maybe when you're surrounded by too many people, there's this feeling of feeling invisible. I want you to really take a pen and paper and jot this down, because it's what's going to make me feel visible, or what makes me go into those feelings of feeling invisible, is going to be very different than what works for you to feel visible or invisible. And part of emotional healing and part of learning to be in the experience of this thing called life is getting to know your spaces and your places and your people and your ways where you feel like a person, where you feel connected, where you feel in sync with yourself, and where you get to know the places and the spaces and the dynamics that you actually don't. So I really encourage you to do this. And I encourage us, when we think about life, definitely I'm all for living your dreams, making visions happen, wanting to feel happy. And at the very same time, I invite us not to skip over the basics of learning to be, learning to know, learning to acknowledge when there's hiccups or times when we don't feel in sync with ourselves, because being with ourselves, knowing when we feel seen, being, having a cognizant and aware understanding of ourselves and the people and places and spaces and dynamics or relationships, and maybe even it's emotional healing, or maybe it's about setting boundaries, or maybe it's about naming explicitly something that's implicit, right? Maybe there's a friend who kind of like ignores you and you always feel kind of like gaslit or confused or unimportant, but you're always doubting yourself, and then you're just like, no, that actually makes me feel pretty small and invisible. And there's something very real. This is a very real experience for me, and I want to just name it for myself and look at, do I want to have a conversation, or do I need to shift how important this relationship is to me? Maybe retain some of my energy internally. So I really encourage you to look at this. And I know for my own self, I have times where I have these really beautiful, lofty visions, and coming back to the basics, coming down to the core, coming down to my steps of getting in touch with myself, getting clarity, honoring the inner capacity and widening the bandwidth and widening the lived experience of being really allows me to kind of reach, all those other dreams and passions and visions that I have. It starts internal. So I really encourage you to do this exercise of being seen and feeling visible and being visible. And it may really start with you, because often when I feel invisible sometimes, or if I'm engaging in friendships, or I'm at a workplace, or I'm feeling unappreciated, sometimes it's because I'm not being clear with my expectations, my own needs. Maybe I need some time for myself. Maybe I need to let the people in my life know what I need. Maybe I need to set different boundaries. Maybe I have to shift some relationships, maybe let some relationships kind of be in the less important category and bring some other relationships closer in. Maybe I need to do some more internal work. Or maybe I need to let go and be more in the moment and put out a prayer, ask for the right kind of angels and support to come into my life. So I encourage you to do exactly this with me as we go on this journey of being and of feeling and being seen and connected to. Because life is so much more meaningful when we are that way.